Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this video. I feel that the people watching this are maybe not people that necessarily follow me in general. Maybe you're looking for like some hope at the end of the tunnel of fibromyalgia, or maybe some of you are curious because maybe you followed me before, and if you did, you might remember that this time last year I was living with fibromyalgia. So this video has actually been a long time coming, and it's quite weird and quite hard to make, to be honest. This time last year, fibromyalgia was my life, all day, every day. And I find it very difficult to really remember the panic and the fear and the desperation that I felt during that time. And in many ways, I don't know that I really want to. It's a bit of a hard trip to go back there, but I feel like it's necessary because I have recovered from it. I'm pretty much 100% now, and I just want other people to know, if they're feeling how I was feeling, that you can recover too. So yeah, I'm going to get this video done and hopefully not have to talk about it very much ever again. So just to very quickly sum up how I got fibromyalgia in the first place, or like the process of getting it, you can maybe look back to my videos a couple of years ago and you'll see when I first started to try and muddle through it. At first I thought I had sciatica because my legs were cramping up. So I was being treated by a physio for sciatica. Being a cyclist as well, it can be quite common. But then the cramping spread to my arms and eventually to my fingers. Oh, shut up. Right, we're just gonna have to do this video with an annoying noise in the background. So the cramps, spread to my arms and my fingers, and eventually I was in a wheelchair, unable to even squeeze a tube of toothpaste or use a peg and put any washing on. I was completely unable to use my legs, my arms, or my fingers. Terrifying situation to be in. The cramps first started when I was driving down to Spain in September, not last year, the year before. And then by November, I was basically in a wheelchair and just doing loads of hospital trips. I had a 3-night stay over, doing tests here, there and everywhere, having appointments, going back to my GP in the UK. And eventually, after all the tests, the diagnosis came back as fibromyalgia, which is sort of a very strange diagnosis that no one fully knows what it is and they don't really know how to treat it. And I was basically told that I would have this for the rest of my life, and that some people learn how to manage the pain pretty well. And it was just sort of like a personal process, depending on how it was going to be with me, but you will have it for the rest of your life, they said. And I called the official fibromyalgia charity to try and get a little bit of hope on this. And after speaking to them, I literally just wanted to find the nearest high bridge. They were like, yeah, oh, you poor thing, yeah, it's pretty rubbish. So life just became pretty crap. I was taking about 8 prescription drugs a day, like really, really strong stuff, and sitting around crying, basically. Sitting on the sofa. I did loads of art and loads of drawing as well when I sort of felt mentally up to it. And occasionally I'd go out and do something. I might get taken out, or I might push myself beyond my limits a little bit, and then I'd be back in bed for like 2 weeks. So it was a real balancing act if I ever did get to go out and do anything. But I quickly decided to stop taking the pills, despite the fact that I was in loads of pain. I didn't like how, well, I kind of did like it, to be honest. I liked how happy they made me, but I knew that it was a fake happiness. I knew that it was drug induced. And I also somehow felt that it was important to know what my body was trying to tell me. If there was pain in my body, I felt like I needed to know about it. So I came off the drugs and decided to start looking for recoveries. I just couldn't accept that I was going to have this forever. It was just not in my psyche to be able to accept this. And I started looking for recoveries because I really hate saying this, but it's the truth. I didn't feel like life was worth living with fibromyalgia. To be honest, the worst part of the day was waking up in the morning and realizing that I had another day to get through, where all I would be doing is sitting on the sofa and being in loads of pain and having other people do things for me. I hated waking up. So to me, it just wasn't an option to stay ill. How that could have resulted otherwise, I don't know, and I don't like to think, and I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but that was honestly how I felt and the truth of how I felt. So I started to look for recovery stories on the internet. I thought, sod the charity, sod the doctors, sod these support groups on Facebook and social media, because they just made me feel so much worse as well. It was so depressing reading how terrible everyone else felt. I decided to find people who had recovered and copy what they did systematically, one at a time. I just thought, if one person can recover, then everyone can recover, and I can recover, and I just need to work out what they're doing and copy it so that I can recover too. So that was my course of action. The first major course of action that I took was following the ANSREY Rewire course. So that's like loads of brain training and stuff like that, and it helps you deal with pain. And it was really helpful on one level. Like, the pain management that I got from that was as good as taking pills, but without having to do it with drugs, which was fantastic. It was really, really insightful, and it got me out of the wheelchair and being able to do things for myself. But once I reached a sort of certain level, I then plateaued for about 6 months and ended up nearly going crazy, because the whole thing is about changing the way that you think, and it's about changing your neural pathways. A big part of it was relaxing and acceptance. Now, I'm not a relaxed person. I'm just not. I'm a super active, really creative, high energy person. I'm not relaxed. It wasn't working for me. The other thing is, as I said, I couldn't accept it. There was no part of me that could accept what was going on. So in the end, I just ended up battling with my brain and ending up nearly going crazy. Yes, there were many benefits. And ironically, I do remember saying at the time, like, it taught me to deal with pain so well that I was like, if I ever break my arm or something like that, I bet I'd be able to deal with the pain really well. And look at this. This arm right here is broken. I did that 2.5 weeks ago, and coping with it super well. So that course definitely did teach me something, but it didn't take me the full way. So the worst part of that course, I think, was trying to sort of pretend that everything was okay, put a smile on my face, pretend that it was all right, and it just wasn't. So the next major breakthrough, and the thing that I'm really here to talk about in this video, was when BMX 2010 world champion Joey Goff sent me a message on Instagram and set a course in motion that was going to change my life. Her mum had ME, which is in the same camp. Fibromyalgia, ME, and chronic fatigue are all basically the same thing, but just different manifestations. And her mum had had ME, had learnt how to recover from it using something called Mickel Therapy, and then became a trained therapist in it. Having previously been a nurse, she was very empathetic and very understanding, but had a different approach for doing things. And I was like, Joey's rad, this woman seems cool, why not give it a go? And literally, from speaking to her in the first session, I went from barely being able to walk 500 meters to going surfing 2 weeks later. Incredible. It was just incredible. This video is basically me trying to explain to you what is Mickel Therapy, and it's a bit of a muddle, but this is my attempt, so here goes. It basically helps you understand what your body is saying to you at any given point. So, for example, all of our emotions are experienced in our bodies. We all know that. For example, if you're nervous, you get churny in your tummy. All the racers that I know, you need to go for a pre-race wee, don't you? Because you're having a physical reaction to the fact that you're nervous about doing the bike race. If you're around someone who pisses you off, you might get a stiff neck, or you might find yourself feeling really exhausted and drained. Or if you're in a stressful situation, everyone knows this one, you might get a stiff neck. And you know that it's being caused by stress. So basically, fibromyalgia, ME, and chronic fatigue are all super exaggerated versions of those sorts of reactions to things. As far as I understand it, for many people that can be a long, slow build-up of just maybe a few things in your life that you're not really dealing with, that are pissing you off, making you nervous, stressing you out, whatever it is. Maybe someone at work's treating you badly. Smaller things, but you've spent a long time letting those feelings build up. For me, it happened very, very suddenly, because I had some very sudden changes in my life. my life basically collapsed all at once. And at the time, even though it seems so obvious now, I couldn't see the connection between what was happening in my body and what was happening externally in my life. So get this, I met this guy, amazing guy, we're now married, fell in love with him in Spain, and he was an illegal immigrant. Yay! He couldn't cross borders to come and live with me in England. He also couldn't work, and he also couldn't go to hospital, which is very worrying because he's a shit hot BMXer. I made the decision, because I really liked him, that I was going to move to Spain and support him. And I had some work with a TV channel back in the UK, so I was able to fly back and forward. So I'd made the decision, was driving down to Spain, had all my possessions in the car, and found out on Twitter that the bike channel had gone bankrupt, which meant that not only did I not have the next 6 months of contracted work to do, they also didn't pay me for 6 months of previous work, including many of my own expenses for travelling here, there and everywhere all over the country. So I had basically paid to make TV shows. Great. I lost so much money, if you include those contracts, it would be enough to put down a deposit on a house. It was a disgustingly huge amount of money. On top of that, I was suddenly in Spain without a job, not speaking the language, when my skill, my job is talking, and the guy that I was with also wasn't allowed to work. So we found ourselves in a financial situation, a dire financial situation, very, very quickly. So there we were, day-to-day life was trying to hide from the police, who were everywhere here in Spain. Spain is just crawling with police. And we knew that if he managed to stay here for 3 years, he'd be granted his residency. But in that time, he just has to not get caught by the police. So obviously every time we went into a bar, there was a bloody policeman sat there having a coffee, wasn't there? So it was just really, really just horrible living with that pressure hanging over your head. But I did what I always do, and I put a smile on my face, and I stayed positive, and I said that everything was going to be okay, and just pretended that I was fine. I was like, I'm capable, I'm adaptable, I can do this, it's all right. But it wasn't all right. My biggest learning last year was learning that thinking positive is not okay. Thinking positive is a load of crap, and I've been doing it for my whole life. It's such an integral part of me. It took a lot of unpicking to make myself break that habit. And it's because everyone always tells you to do it as well. You go on Instagram and everyone's like, think positive. And now I'm like, think fuck off. Your body is telling you something. If you've got anxiety, it means you're worried about something. If you've got a stiff neck, even if it's from sitting in your office chair for 8 hours a day, it's your body telling you that it doesn't want to be sat in an office chair for 8 hours a day. You need to do something about that so it doesn't get worse. Your body is just telling you stuff. And if you just pretend that everything's okay, or just try and have a quick massage or something like that, you're not actually listening to it. And the thing with fibromyalgia is that it's so horrific, it's so painful, it's so terrifying, isolating and upsetting. You end up getting trapped in it because it creates more of a negative situation than you were already in. And the things that maybe triggered the fibro in the first place are not the things that keep it going. And that's a really important thing to remember. I'm going to come to that a little bit later on. So I was there still trying to keep positive, and then unable to even get work because I was so ill, as in a wheelchair, unable to sort anything out with our finances. We basically ended up homeless, living in a field with some crazy religious hippies that and I just tried to make the best of a bad situation. Like, I carried on smiling. I was like, well, you know what? We have no electricity. We don't have a shower. We're washing in a river. We're living off grid. We're getting back to nature. We're looking at the stars at night. We're trying to make a house out of wood that we're finding in skips. This is wonderful. This is such an experience. It wasn't. It was horrible. Some people maybe really would like that back to basics lifestyle. I'm from London. I'm career driven. I'm ambitious. I'm creative. Getting up in the morning and not having anything to do other than fend off some Christian nutters that are trying to convert me and like pick ants and mosquitoes off of my skin was not the way that I wanted to live, but I just pretended that I was happy and thought positive. So then I got worse, right? And I just could not get myself out of the trap. Still at that time, I couldn't see the link. In my first session with Jill, Joey's mum, the Mickel therapist, she basically got me talking and got me to say out loud the things that I hated. And I realised, because I didn't even realise it myself, that's the scary thing. I realised that I hated where I was living in a field, building a tree house out of bits of rotten wood. And I risked getting a credit card and getting rent in a proper house. And even though I didn't have the funds to do it, start trying to get myself into a much healthier situation, a happier situation. And like I say, I had total faith in Jill, because after 2 weeks, I went from barely able to walk to surfing. So that gave me a little bit more faith to sort of take those risks and think that things would pay off. She got me to write my symptoms down every single day. And at first, it was like 10 pages of stuff, because I was in pain all the time. My muscles were just cramped up like this all the time. But I started to notice rhythms. As I wrote it down, I started to notice times when it went up and when it went down. And as we went through it together, she would ask me what I was doing, what I was thinking, what I was feeling in those moments. And I started to notice patterns. And then we could start saying, well, how could you have done something differently there? How could you have been in a situation that didn't stress you out so much? How could you be in a situation where you stood up for yourself a little bit more and stuff like that? And she basically taught me to look for the negatives in life, which was a really, really difficult habit to break. Sometimes I had to force myself to do it, because I was like, well, there's nothing wrong. I'm absolutely fine. And I really thought it. And I'd like make things up. And I was like, well, maybe it could be this. And then that was enough for me to start now recognizing honestly how I feel, because I was lying to myself and I didn't even know it. And it's not about being negative, okay? I haven't become a negative person. It's just about identifying the negative and then taking a positive action to make yourself happier, or to get that arsehole out of your life, or, whatever the thing is, being honest about it, but then taking a positive action. And another important part of the process was creating a balanced plan every day, so that like the mind and the body has something to look forward to every day, like being productive, getting myself out of the financial strain that I was under, but also allowing myself to have time to have fun, enjoy time with my husband, enjoy social time, which was difficult because I was in Spain and didn't really know people. So putting effort into making friends, like really basic stuff, but just building like a fulfilling, balanced life is basically what did it. So, like I say, it took 2 weeks to go from barely able to walk to being able to do sport again, to be able to look for jobs and actually start working. But it's pretty much taken me a year to get rid of all those smaller lingering symptoms. So, for example, Juan only got his residency in July. So up until that point, I pretty much constantly lived with a knot in my chest here. I couldn't get rid of it. And that is quite a normal reaction to being very worried about somebody that you love, knowing that they could just get taken away from you at any moment. So when he got his residency, that went. But then, and the path hasn't just been like all like that either. It's been like this, because there's been then as I started living my life again, other things got introduced that made me feel bad. And because I wasn't in a habit of identifying them, it maybe then took a while till the symptoms like got really bad again before I was like, oh, I really need to deal with something. So for example, I got a new job, really loved the job, really loved the people, but they didn't give me a contract. And I noticed that I was going, every time I opened the door to the building, I'd start getting like muscle twitches, sometimes in my legs, sometimes in my arm, just like little spasms. And by this time I was like super in tune with my body, like any tiny little thing to change, I'd notice it. And took a little while, and I was like, I'm really worried about the fact that I don't have a contract. Like I've been living illegally, doing things a little bit backwards for a while now. I just kind of want to get back on the straight and narrow and do things legit. So I was a bit nervous, but I spoke to my bosses and I was like, guys, I really need a contract. It's really important to me. And they said yes. So just, taking a deep breath and being assertive in sort of scary situations was enough at the time being to reduce my symptoms. But then they flared up again after a while because that contract never materialised. And I was getting worried and I was angry. And then I started getting a twitch in my eyelid every time that I walked into work. And I realised that they weren't going to give me a contract. So I decided to take control of the situation and start looking for extra work on the side. And the symptoms reduced again. So it's just about taking control and making decisions instead of just ignoring them, being like, oh, do you know what? I like the job. My bosses are nice. I haven't got a contract, but they've paid me every time. I'm like, I couldn't live with that. I'd had a bad experience previously with one company going bankrupt. I'd had another bad experience of living with a husband who's illegal. I didn't want any more illegal crap. So I had to do something about it. Otherwise, my body would just start screaming at me. So yeah, they're just sort of a couple of examples of how my path of recovery wasn't exactly smooth. And as things got reintroduced into my life, I had to find new ways of dealing with it, being more assertive, being more confident. But there's two really important things to note. And as I mentioned earlier, one is that the causes of your fibromyalgia, your ME, or chronic fatigue that caused it in the first place are not necessarily the ones that keep you trapped in it. So there's actually no need to go backwards. You don't need to go and look in your past life and be like, well, what caused this? Because those things might not be the same things that are keeping you trapped there. So I'm going to give you another example. And that was that I kept on getting symptoms every time I sat on the sofa. Now, the sofa can't cause me fibromyalgia, but what had happened is that I'd spent a year pretty much sitting on a sofa and crying and being scared and just being in a complete panic. So then my body started to associate sofas with bad times. Mad, isn't it? Then every time I got on a sofa, I start getting a ringing in my ears. So now it could be a bit annoying because it's a bit like having a trauma. Like I knew that the sofa itself wasn't the bad thing, but I kind of had to build trust in my body again and let it know that I wasn't going to spend the next 12 months of my life sitting here every time I sat on a sofa. So I'd sit down, I'd maybe be all right for 20 minutes, and then I'd start getting symptoms. I'd be like, oh, I just have to get up and do something else for a little bit before I come and sit down. A little bit annoying, but it was part of the process in order for my body to regain trust in me, I suppose, and my emotions and minds to realise that this is not a dangerous space. It's a fine, all right space. So yeah, that's just an example of how the sofa didn't cause my fibromyalgia, but kept me trapped in the cycle of it. And I reckon many people with fibromyalgia, especially active ones, could definitely easily have similar triggers, things like that. So another mad thing that I really want to mention as well is that Mickel Therapy is all about just learning how to read your body, whatever the scenario. I've also had endometriosis my whole life, which is a very physical illness. It's like you get, what do you call it? You get little clots outside your uterus and they stick together and they stick to your organs and they rip. And then they stick again and then they rip again. So you're like ripping scar tissue and it's incredibly painful. Get it every month. I had it every month since I was 18. It's a horrible illness if anybody knows anything about it. And it had got to a stage where the doctors are like, right, there's nothing more we can do for you. We can't prolong this any longer. And I've been given the green light to have a hysterectomy, to have my womb removed because it was such a mess in there. And that's gone. Like, what the hell? I was just focusing on my fibromyalgia, how to recover from that. And then I was like talking to my mum. I was like, hey, do you remember like how I've had 12 years or whatever of endometriosis? Don't seem to have that anymore. So Mickel Therapy is not just about fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and ME. It's also about anything in your body, absolutely anything. I don't know too much about this. They say that it can recover you from all illnesses, anxiety, depression, cancer, common colds, broken arms, and I haven't really looked into it that much, and I'm probably not going to because I'm just going to carry on riding my bike and living my life, but it doesn't interest me enough. But it is fascinating how, like recently at work, most people have got colds and ended up taking several days off work, whereas then, I'd catch it as well and I didn't have to take any time off work and I just have it for like 24 hours, or how I've broken my arm and it's just recovering so crazily quickly. It's like, I just know how to listen to my body without pushing through pain, and just know exactly what it's telling me. So maybe there's something in it. Maybe it can recover everything, because basically your body is just telling you what's wrong. And if you learn how to listen to it, you know what to do. So yeah, that's how I recovered. Massive thanks to Joey Goff and Jill Goff, who basically have changed my life and got my life back. I dread to think what would have happened if I hadn't got better. And it's just a little bit of hope for anyone else out there who is living with it. Just remember that what I've gone through is not the same as what's going to be causing yours. Probably got very different experiences, very different lifestyles, but once you work out what it is, you just need to remember that I've got better, so can you. I mean, I had that in my mind from the beginning, and it was a bit of a process to work it out. But basically, if one person can get better, everyone can get better. So you can all get better. And if you want to get in touch with Jill, she does get sessions on Skype as well, so you don't even need to be in the country, or just any Mickel therapist. I thoroughly recommend you do it, because you'll just get better. And then you'll be like me, and you'll look back and you'll be like, whoa, that was some weird, crazy nightmare that I can barely even remember. And I can't even really remember what it was like to live through it. I've written this all down to try and like re-jog my memory, and it's just like anything in life, you know, like when you have a broken heart or something, you look back on it and you're like, did that really happen? Did I really feel that bad? But yeah, it happened, and now I'm here on the other side, and I hope that you can be too. And that's my story. Stop thinking positive. So there you go. Love you. Bye bye.